far more didactic. I mean, I work in an area, I think my comfortable area is vague. That's where I kind of, I'm at home. Whereas John had a very straightforward, in fact one of his lines, he used to quote a lot when he was talking about songs, was say what you mean, make it rhyme and give it a backbeat, you know, and it was, that's how he was. There was really no fucking around it. It was just very direct. And I didn't work in that way, so artistically, there was enough for us to talk about because it was something that we could argue about, you know, and say, well, you know, I like the idea of not actually knowing what somebody's saying. I enjoy William Burroughs, so I'm not quite sure what his point is, but he puts me in a world that I want to know more about, you know, and he said, well, that's fucking rubbish, you know. You can't change the world through being nebulous like that. You've got to be direct and tell people what's wrong. You know? So there's all that, you know, it was a great guy present. It was fabulous. Great guy to talk to. I miss him a lot for that. Yeah. I guess Brian Eno is, in a way, not supplanted John, because nobody supplants anybody else. But there's a parallel with Eno. Eno was also incredibly bright star and a great sense of humour. I really cherish those kinds of relationships. Keeps you active and to be the sparring all the time. I love that, working in a working situation. Those are kind of collaborations that are really good.
And we move on now to 76.
Sorry.
I feel like an MC here.
I know,
Meanwhile,
this is your life.
And we have station to station and TVC
I'm walking out with a red book in it. David, do you recognize this voice?
That's exactly.
Oh no, not that old hag.
This is kind of a, what do we call it, a backhanded compliment.
Yeah.
In that you were...
I'll be the judge of that.
You were quite ensconced in your world of drugs at the time, but your music didn't seem to suffer one iota.
Well, in fact, it was quite good.
Which is somewhat of a paradox, I guess.
I know. I keep telling my son that none of it's true, that drugs makes you worse, and you know, you can still write just as well when you're not stoned out your gourd. And,
but you don't have any anecdotes to back
in the 80s, I seriously doubted that. I thought, well, maybe I should start doing it again. It's looking very bleak at the moment. But now I think I'm all right, Doctor. Yeah, I think it took a while for me to restabilise from that whole drug period. It is. I'm glad I took drugs. I really am. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody necessarily. It's your own choice. But I certainly am not going to go run around waving a finger and saying no, don't take them. There was something that I personally achieved through that experience. So I backstepped. When I was younger, when 18, 19, that sort of age, I really felt an affinity, a strong empathy for Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, as it happens. And the main thing that charged me, a notion that I felt valuable, was the idea of the transience of life and not holding on to things, and that things change all the time. And that the question of absolutes came up, that it's impossible to live with the idea that things are going to be permanent. You know? And I think that became a very, very, probably a thread, if there are any threads that run through what I've done. So a thread that ran through my career. And drugs kind of really exploited that to the nth degree, and gave me that you can see one situation, one landscape, and see it in so many different ways. And I think that alone, having come out of all that, it's not hard for me to readjust my vision in certain things and see it from all kinds of perspectives, which I guess for an artist is actually very useful. So in that way, that I don't regret it at all. I regret the physical and psychological damage which I think I caused myself. I regret that immensely. One reason primarily being is that I had no idea how to relate to other people, specifically my son and all that. So that there was hardships involved in that, you know, not sort of realising how much you're pushing somebody out of your life because you really have no control over any kind of domestic situation. You really don't relate to other people. You have no thoughts or gentleness or caring for other people. You don't kind of know that. So those are the downsides of it. I would remark loudly.
That's right. Well, that sounds very chilling. I mean,
Yeah, it is very chilling, and it's a real downside. But the art part is real cool. It's terrible. Yeah. Hey, you win some, you lose some. It swings around.
Well, I guess
no, it isn't. I mean, that's devastating. That aspect
that's
of
right,
it is devastating.
Yeah.
But still, I can't regret what I've done personally, and I thank God that my son has turned out to be a really great guy and had enough sustenance within himself and enough strength of personality to be able to forage some kind of existence out of the mess that I created. And fortunately, we've gotten incredibly close over the last 15 years, so that worked out okay as well.
Getting back to this actual song, what is this like? Is this really about a TV gobbling up one's lover?
Well, yes, it was. It was sort of, I guess, a vague notion that there could be something of it was actually a virtual, looking back at it, of course, but this is in hindsight, this is so useful. It was a virtual reality television set. It actually was a physically manifested alternative universe that was on there, that was through the screen. I guess I can imagine the kind of evening that came out of. Yes, and the idea was that in fact it sucked in my girlfriend and she was in there somewhere and I couldn't get her back. Actually, somebody pointed out that there was a film that came out that had much the same idea, but it was a horror movie of a small child that was sucked into the television. What was that called?
Wasn't there? Yeah, okay. Yeah, there was something like that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. No,
it preceded that sort of way of thinking.
Right.
The idea of very much the television being a central alternative universe.
How about the rather selfish idea among certain Bowie enthusiasts that you have been at your peak when you're in your worst turmoil? Is that something that disturbs you?
We'd love to see our
artists suffer.
Our artists suffer,
Yeah,
we'd love to see them go. I mean, Iggy was always boring when he stopped cutting himself up, and 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 the best thing they do is die young. And Sid Vicious was great, when he was really screwed up.
Right.
There is an element, I think, of that in the kind of the pantheon that we created, the rock god. Who sort of delightfully sort of goes through all those awful things that we as audience actually don't really want to try, but it's good to see somebody else do them. But I care not a jot for that. I like being, I think probably now I'm really quite precious about my very personal and domestic life in as much that I really enjoy it. I've been very fortunate to be able to stabilise my life over the last 10 years, even more so for the last 7 years since I met my now wife. And that's a glorious position to be in, and I really can't afford to get mixed up in the expectations of all of it.
Moving on to Berlin and Low,
yeah,
and the song Sound and Vision. Why did you feel the need to become a recluse and live above a bicycle shop?
Yeah, I thought both Iggy and myself, has been very well documented, had immense drug problems, and we really thought that what we should do was move out of the areas of temptation and try and clean up somewhere. So naturally, we moved to the heroin capital of Europe.
Why not? You never know. I mean, you just never know.
We were totally oblivious to that. We had no idea.
Oh, really? You didn't
know
have
until we got there.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely none. But I think, we both had a crack at persevering, and I think, we did okay. I can only talk for myself, but I know I did good. I did good. I really was able to go through some sort of exorcism of both drugs and psychological damage. I think I helped. Being back in a very pedestrian and proletariat situation was good for me. It was good for me to go to the supermarket and buy food. It was good for me to be bankrupt. It was good for me to go through all those things. It really, if that hadn't have happened to me, I really don't know what would have happened. Yeah, well, I can guess.
Shock therapy?
It was, yeah. It really was a real bump, a real coming back down to earth. And fortunately, Berlin is one of those cities that there's a wonderful blasé quality to Berlin. It doesn't take anything seriously. The last thing to take seriously is any kind of celebrity, And you are reduced to a snivelling idiot. for a few weeks and you'll be realising they're no different from anybody else.